Welcome to another RFK prediction for 2024. He has picked Nicole Shanahan as his running mate, and we're going to see how that impacts the map coming up right now. All right, so the fundamentals that we're going to look into today have to do with the polling. So, evidently, if you look off to the side, you'll notice that the general election polling in a 1v1 race, which will not happen, is a 1.1 lead for Trump. But when we look at the polling for Kennedy involved in this election, plus Jill Stein, plus Cornel West, you see that Trump is up by 2.7 on the aggregate. So, that's a positive 1.6. In the last video I did, that margin actually favored Trump more than it does now. So Trump's receding a little bit like RFK's hairline. It's somewhat brutal, but it's still winnable. Now, I tell you what, okay, RFK, last video I made was polling at around 15%. He is polling at 10.2%. That's not good enough, okay? Today, we got to really talk about how we're looking at Kennedy polling below the threshold you would need to meet to basically get into the debate stage, okay? So Kennedy isn't really going to be in for a huge explosion in popularity, given that he won't be able to present his message to the American people in such an extent that Trump and Biden will eventually do. Assuming Biden even does the debates, which he probably shouldn't. But even more than that, when you're looking at Kennedy, Kennedy is not on the Ross Perot level. He's a notch below that. He's between in popularity and clout. He's somewhere between where Gary Johnson was in 2016, where he got like 3 to 5% of the vote, to again, Ross Perot, who was more like 20%. And so he's somewhere in the 10 to 12% range of popularity, okay? Jill Stein's at 2%, Cornel West at 1.8, okay? All you need to know about Cornel West is like he's one of those black guys that drinks IPAs, you know what I mean? Like just Bernie bro, insane. We don't know. But we have the VP choice for RFK, and that's Nicole Shanahan, of course. She is pretty cute. Now, she's only 38, and she looks like that, though, so that's the problem. But aside from that, in regards to a choice, a lot of people said that there's a very niche group of Republicans that when DeSantis lost the primary said, oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to vote for RFK or something like that. Well, that was on the precipice of RFK being strong on the vaccine, which DeSantis is known for being strong on the COVID lockdowns. And so there was a coalescence there. But that was on the implication that RFK was going to pick a conservative VP to unify the country, so to speak. Again, this is all political fantasy. But anyway, the point is that RFK doubles down on the liberal bona fides, which, seeing the last name, obviously all liberal. Yeah, he picks a liberal Silicon Valley chick, and she's cute. But the problem is that she knows nothing about politics, so she's not going to appeal to people on that basis. And on top of that, by the way, she says in her Tuesday speech that she didn't even think much of Kennedy in the first place, but became drawn to his campaign after hearing interviews, which doesn't make sense considering that he talks like an Etch and Sketch. And anyway, which she said gave her hope for our democracy. So anyway, apparently she's really rich. If you look at the articles that are promoting Nicole Shanahan, they're saying that she's the ex of Sergey Brin, who was a big stockholder in Google, I believe. But anyway, the point is that she's known for being the ex of somebody else. So first of all, that's not a strong political candidate or running mate, by the way. If you're famous for being the girlfriend of somebody, that's not cool. And also, believe this, he picks her apparently because of this, okay? A deep-pocketed investor could also provide the financial backstop for Kennedy's expensive campaign and trying to get on the ballot in 50 states. So there's two good things for Donald Trump in this campaign. I have a lot of these solidified states. It's pretty even. But, okay, so he picks Nicole Shanahan, who's a young, hot, liberal chick, okay? Now, what's important about this? Number one, it means that any Republicans that were going to vote for RFK, most of them just said, nah, screw it, I'm voting Trump. Because reality is that all the people with the conservative support that RFK had that would have taken support from Trump is now dead because they just realized, okay, this guy's totally out of the closet as a liberal when he picks Shanahan. And that's brutal, okay? Now, what's worse even is that she has money, and apparently he's being kind of pragmatic in that he's entertaining this girl who knows nothing about politics like he does into his race, into getting political clout in exchange for what? Investment. So if she has a ton of money from Silicon Valley, what that brings to the campaign is eligibility in all 50 states. Last video, I had to come up with the grift idea of like, well, maybe if RFK runs as a libertarian, he'll get on the ballot. Now, if he has funding, then he'll get the signups easily. He can pay a bunch of jerk offs with clipboards and they can go to houses and get signups. That's easy. Okay, so if that's true, then clearly he will get on the ballot in all the states. That's the plan. Okay, so those are two things that are pro-Trump in a way. Now, also keep in mind that RFK support went from 15 to 10%. So I believe that has to do with the fact that people are realizing that really there's only two electable candidates and that it won't explode with Kennedy. Plus, people, when they realize that he won't be on the debate stage, will just give up. And there's some people that are delusional that will actually think Kennedy stands a shot when he doesn't. And that's ridiculous. Now, so he's losing conservative support as well. And that's important. So whatever support he does have is more liberal. Like, in fact, I would say like 2/3 of his 10% there is got to be like people to the left of Joe Rogan, which is brutal to watch. And that's also really tough because when you look at the lead for Trump, it is only 2.7%. And so you could really see RFK dropping out, helping Biden out a ton, okay, catching up. But nevertheless, he's not gonna. I don't see that happening. So let's fill out the map for what we know here. So first and foremost, we got to solidify some of these Republican states. I got to say, Florida is a safe lock for the GOP. In fact, if Trump has the popular vote at all, I could see Florida going like 7 points Republican. We're seeing Latinos looking really good for Republicans. They've been trending R for like 8 years, okay? A really hard R. They've gone from like 26% Republican in 2012 to like 40% now. And that's a brilliant thing to watch. And so that's really just awestrucking, okay? So my people, it's clicking. We're so back. Anyway, keep the other ones out. But here we go. So the next state I wanted to talk about was North Carolina, because North Carolina, people are saying it's a battleground state, and it really isn't, okay? When we're looking at this election, we are really trying to focus on where to spend the money and also what are the down ballot effects of RFK in this election, okay? So first and foremost, RFK, in particular, in my opinion, is someone who will hurt the margin for Joe Biden everywhere. But what's worse even is that he's also going to get on the ballot and he's going to make the down ballot races for the Republicans more easy to achieve. Okay, so when you're looking at this, New York, for example, New York has a ton of swing districts. Now, that was a big boon under Lee Zeldin's stewardship of that campaign in 2022, okay? When he ran for governor and he got it close, even though that was an L, top of the ballot, people that were voting in the House elections just passively because they thought Zeldin was better than Hochul, all of a sudden, those Republicans win in the U.S. Congress, and that flips the House in 22. So that same rule applies. New York, which is oftentimes like 20% Democrat, if it goes like 11% for Joe Biden, that's hundreds of thousands of votes of a difference, and therefore would net like an extra couple seats in the House. So that's why it's important to keep track of all these differences. So even though, let's say, he wins Illinois by 12 instead of 21, that's still a big deal when it comes to the House. And that's the difference between Trump winning the election by 3% in the popular vote versus losing it by 2 and still winning out in the Electoral College. So that's some nerd speak for y'all. Now, the other state we're going to mention is, again, Iowa. Don't spend $1 in there. Nebraska, I'm going to keep all red because that's just simpler. It won't matter in the math anyway. Then we got another state, okay? Ohio, solid red, okay? People will say, oh, Bernie, your Uncle Bernie Moreno, okay, like my skin, oh, he's not going to win. He will. And Trump will lead the state by like 12. Okay. A lot of the people that would have voted for Biden are going to vote for RFK as a protest vote to say, like, you know what, Biden, you've done jack squat for anybody, anytime, anywhere, any place, especially as of the last 4 years. And I think that's going to really show up in the vote in November. Now, moving on, we also have some great developments in certain states. Chief among them is going to be Colorado. I think this is actually going to be a weak inflection point for Biden. I think that he'll still win the state, but I think you're going to be surprised by how close it could possibly be. A lot of what made Colorado blue in the first place was maybe 1/3 Hispanic immigration. You're welcome. And it was also 2/3 college educated whites, the people living in Boulder, like that one song by Chainsmokers. Yes. Okay. So Boulder, Colorado, just really, really just stereotypically what makes the state liberal. I think that these people will not see the error of their ways, but they're definitely going to drop out in terms of participation. So you could see the state that went by like 14 for Biden to like maybe 7 or so. So I think it's going to be a little closer. That being said, still blue. I'm not doing margins, by the way. That's too autistic, and I'm just refusing to do that. Now, I think New Mexico also will get noticeably closer. Like, I think it could be between... Wow, I spoke in an accent. But anyway, I think it'll be under 5 points for Biden. So that's a huge swing to the right. The reason why I say that, folks, is because New Mexico in particular has a ton of Hispanics. And those Hispanics are trending so right-wing that it's actually alarming for the Democrats. They're getting felted. And when we look at the populations that are really going to go Democrat, it's going to be black people, which even those are trending. Those people are trending Republican as well. But I mean, there's not many black people in New Mexico. There's a ton of Mexicans, those, and they're trending like 8% Republican. Now, what's also interesting is that beyond that, again, the suburbs are not huge in New Mexico either. And that's something that has been trending Democrat. But also, they have fracking as a huge part of their economy. That nomenclature has been terrible under Joe Biden. Energy independence has been a huge fixture of the Trump campaign. And so for that to not have been sufficiently adequately, kind of like actually addressed by the Biden campaign kind of leaves you kind of like, what the hell? So those people that used to work in oil fields in New Mexico are going to be fucking jilted and seething. Also, let's move on to, let me see. North Carolina, like I said, it's going Republican because obviously all the trends just point it that way. I mean, I don't even need to look at a poll. But let's move on to another state like Virginia. I think Virginia is going to trend Republican by a lot, but still not enough to win. I feel like as if Virginia is a state that if it went plus 10 for Biden last time, we saw Youngkin win it in 21. I think Trump can lose it by like 5 because, again, not a single rural Appalachian voter will vote Biden this time. And I feel like the Nova counties are still pro, like that Nikki Haley, Joe Biden, George Bush type of vibe. But realistically speaking, will they actively turn out? No, they won't. Now, moving on. If we're paying attention to the state of Georgia, this is going to be an easy one to decide. We see Trump is up by 5.2% in these polls on aggregate, okay? It's brilliant. Now, Trump at the lowest point out of like 5 or 6 different polls with thousands of people polled each almost, it seems as if he's down by, he's actually up by 3. So, I mean, there's really no way it could go blue at this point. And you really look at it because of the Kemp campaign in 2022. When you have a solid conservative candidate, and I give the caveat that, Kemp did cuck on the election last time, but that's only because he kind of learned the error of his ways post 2018, post 2020. He kind of recalibrated again. So he's a very cyclical sort of politician. But now he's pretty much a standard bearer for the MAGA thing. And I will say that his reelection kind of shows the bones of a solid Republican coalition. Whereas before in 2020, people were like, oh, it's over. It's a demographic winter. Truth is that a lot of these suburbs are not looking so hostile to Trump like they used to be years ago. And a lot of these people that voted from Trump 2016 to Biden 2020 are viewing that again. It's gone to shit. So just point of fact, it's going Republican by like 5. Now, the next state I wanted to talk about is going to be Nevada. Nevada has Trump up by 3%. All the polls show that to be the case. And the most recent one that had a contradiction was in October, whereas October, as we all know, is where Trump had a huge surge for a myriad of reasons. Which brings up another topic, by the way, is that Jill Stein will take more voters from Biden than she did from Hillary in 2016. The reason being is that Jill Stein is hammering on the Palestine issue, and that's something that Joe Biden has been really wishy-washy, of course. So that's not going to look good for Joe, and I got to point that out for y'all. So that's another thing going against him. Now, Nevada's going Republican, of course. Again, Latino surge in Republican support. Not only that, but obviously 2022 showed that it was pretty good for Republicans, and there was also a snowstorm that made Laxalt lose, so keep that in mind. And yeah, so Nevada's an easy dub. And then what's more than that is that we have New Hampshire, which we're going to cover really quickly because New Hampshire overall is just a bad state to talk about for a plethora of reasons. Chief among them is that there's no polling that's adequate for New Hampshire. Like straight up, there is no polling that I can find. And so what that tells me is that neither campaign is spending a ton of money there, which shows that the campaigns don't view it as like being important to the electoral math, which is interesting. But definitely, I think New Hampshire will probably lean Trump, and I've been more averse to say that in the past. Truth is that New Hampshire is definitely more amenable to Donald Trump given how bad things are overall. And again, I see a ton of people in New Hampshire, a lot of these white like millennial types voting for Jill Stein, Cornel West, etc. Okay, now moving on. We've got Minnesota. Minnesota, again, difficult to say because it's so cursed. I mean, it hasn't gone Republican in over 52 years even, which is insane to think about, that there's women in menopause that were born around the time that a Republican won. Okay, so, I mean, that's a disgusting thought, frankly. And so given that fact, I think that it will probably go blue again. It's just so cursed. I mean, it'll go Republican when the Vikings win a Super Bowl, so it's looking really tough. To really predict as going Republican. So anyway, let's move on. Arizona is going to be really easy for the Republicans at this point. We can look at the polling. I mean, look at that beautiful margin, okay? 5.2 for Trump. That's voting about 3 points to the right of the country. That means that he's stronger in Arizona than he is like overall in America, which is actually nuts to think about because it used to be the opposite, and that's brilliant. Now, I will tell you this, okay? So Trump outperformed the national environment in Arizona in 2020 by like 3 to 4% in the official numbers. Yeah. So what that means is that like if he's winning by 3 in the popular vote or even 1, he's still winning Arizona, which means that Kerry Lake probably wins Arizona too. So I mean that's pretty obvious. And a lot of these polls aren't even in a 5-way or in a RFK simulation. So imagine all the votes he's going to take. So that's looking brilliant as well. Let's follow this logic into the Rust Belt. We're going to give at large Maine to Trump because again, RFK, those green candidates are going to suck the lifeblood out of a lot of these millennial white people. So Pennsylvania, for whatever reason, is the one state that he seems to have the most problems with. I mean Trump. And you could say, well, the Democrats basically wiped the floor in 2022, and they also have a strong Senate candidate down ballot in Robert Casey Jr., which is kind of true, but that doesn't matter. And so, anyway, we have a horrible poll by Susquehanna, which only has 450 samples in there compared to the ones that have 1,000 people in it. And that poll has Biden up by 5, which is ridiculous. But if we look at the other polls that are bigger and better than Susquehanna, you can see that Trump is up or tied, which lends credence to the fact that if you put RFK in there, then clearly you're going to lose liberal votes. And so that's going Republican. No shadow of a doubt. Wisconsin, for whatever reason, is also looking close, abnormally close, as compared to Arizona and all that. The reason being is that there's a lot of fair weather people in Arizona, Georgia, in the Sun Belt that swapped elections, swapped parties in 2020 and 2016. I feel like there's less elasticity in the vote in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And that's because there's different types of people that you need to appeal to. But if we look at Wisconsin, again, the economy's not doing great. The politicians in Wisconsin are not super popular, Tony Evers, etc. What that means for us as potential voters is that it looks pretty good for Donald Trump. Again, they don't really have polls for RFK involved, but if Trump is winning by like 1% in a 1v1, then clearly if you take a couple points away from Biden, add RFK on the ballot, then it's looking good for Trump. So, I mean, a lot of other pollsters, a lot of other YouTubers would be like, oh my God, it's so over. No, it isn't. Okay, final state. Let's look at Michigan. So looking at this result, Trump is up by 3.5% in Michigan. So again, that's why the polls are skewed against Trump in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, is because either they're favoring Trump in Michigan, which doesn't make sense logically, or there's something else afoot. So that's how you know I'm right about this. But I mean, if you look at these polls, again, they're looking really good. And even the worst ones have them tied anyway. And if we look at the poll here that has the most amount of responses, Trump is up by 3, okay? So, I mean, just looking at that, then it's pretty clear who's going to win. And so by that logic, I think Trump is going to win Michigan by a lot. And that's with their Republican Party in tatters. It's only going to get better as they resolve whatever party leadership issue they have there. So that's going to be the map prediction. Really optimistic, but hey, so for all you RFK supporters, your guy is getting absolutely zilch in the Electoral College in my prediction. In fact, I think Trump is going to win by 100 electoral votes. So it's a damn near landslide. It's a 319 vote victory versus Biden-Harris 219. RFK Jr. won't even get on the debate stage. It's sad. It's somewhat pathetic. But yeah, to summarize my point, Nicole Shanahan is a far leftist young woman. So this is not appealing to the Joe Rogan Trump kind of like vibe people. You know what I mean? Like those Aaron Rodgers types that are like center right, maybe. Those people are going to come home for Donald Trump or not vote at all. And so RFK is losing out on those votes. So he's only primarily sucking them out of Joe Biden now because he picked a more liberal candidate. So that's too bad for Sleepy Joe. It's looking pretty scary hours. See y'all in the next one. Adios.